At 5:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a half-eaten granola bar, a client escalation report the size of a CVS receipt, and a headset that had permanently fused to the side of my skull. My name's Gerald Whitfield. I'm 48 years old, and for the past 15 years, I've been the guy who keeps the wheels from falling off at Pinnacle Solutions. My third call of the day was with a client in Munich who wanted to scream about an SLA breach that hadn't even technically happened. I diffused it like always. 10 minutes later, our Manila liaison pinged about a backlog of onboarding forms stuck in someone's idea of a digital workflow. I fixed that too. This was just normal Tuesday morning stuff for me. For 15 years, I was the quiet engine keeping our biggest contract from falling apart. I didn't ask for praise, I didn't make noise, I just delivered. While the rest of the organization chased agile buzzwords and rearranged deck chairs on the PowerPoint Titanic, I was putting out real fires with my bare hands and whatever tools I could find. The founder, Charles Hartley, back when he actually ran things, once called me his safety net with teeth in front of the board. I laughed then, but I knew what he meant. I kept the whole thing from free-falling. If you've been in corporate America long enough, you know what I'm talking about. There's always that one guy who actually knows where the bodies are buried. See, I wasn't just some middle manager pushing papers around. I was the guy who understood the intricate web of client relationships, regulatory requirements, and operational dependencies that kept our largest account humming. When other departments created problems, I solved them before they became disasters. When clients had concerns, I was the voice they trusted. When systems broke down, I was the one who knew exactly which buttons to push to get things working again. The thing is, quiet competence works until the volume gets cranked by someone who thinks shouting equals strategy. Enter Austin Hartley. He arrived like a cannonball out of an MBA catalog. White teeth, loafers with no socks, a spreadsheet fetish, and the kind of ego that required its own onboarding flow. His dad, the founder, pulled strings to get him the VP of Operations title before he could spell compliance. I met him in the hallway on his second day. He was trying to connect his phone to the office printer, said something like, "You must be Gerald. I've heard you basically run this account." I smiled. We both knew it wasn't a compliment. Austin was 29, fresh out of some prestigious MBA program, full of theories about lean operations and digital transformation. The kind of guy who used words like synergy and paradigm shift in casual conversation. He had that confidence that only comes from never having to clean up your own mistakes. At first, he was all charm and awkward fist bumps, but within a month it started. Meetings where I was suddenly uninvited, emails that went out to clients without review, process changes that ignored the realities of our client contracts like gravity was optional. He'd CC me on announcements that affected my team, then ghost me when I asked for clarification. At one point, he called my work legacy operational clutter in a company Slack channel. I wasn't tagged. I was just the punchline. The worst part? People started listening to him because he had a title and a jawline and a slide deck with the word synergy in 42-point font. He wore confidence like cologne, and most of the executives, too tired or too distracted, let him spray it everywhere. Meanwhile, I was still doing the job, still managing the client, still taking those early morning crisis calls, staying up late to proof technical documentation, reviewing deliverables line by line so nothing caught fire. My team knew what was happening, but we were told to align with Austin's vision and lean into the transformation. What transformation? Taking a stable, revenue-generating account and stuffing it into a blender labeled cost optimization. I didn't argue. Not yet. I watched. I documented. When he called my workflow bloated, I smiled and nodded. Let the boy hang his own tie. But I'll admit, by the third time I was cut from a project sync, I felt it. That crawl in your chest that whispers, "They don't want you here anymore." Still, I had leverage. They just didn't know it yet. Austin was about to find out what happens when you mistake silence for submission. The first time Austin rewrote my project schedule without consulting me, I figured it was a rookie mistake. The second time, I thought maybe it was ego. By the third, when he rerouted a $4 million vendor invoice through his friend's agile task force, I realized we weren't dealing with inexperience. We were dealing with entitlement dressed up in a designer blazer. Austin didn't ask. He declared. One morning, I logged in and found a brand new workflow tool live for my team. No notice, no testing, No integration checks. Just a link in Slack with the caption, "Try this out." It's cleaner. Cleaner? It didn't even have document version control. My analyst spent 3 hours just figuring out how to upload the right PDFs. We flagged the risks. I flagged the risks repeatedly. I kept a running list. Missing escalation steps, unclear data access permissions, an API integration that had more holes than a golf course. The workflow tool he'd implemented couldn't handle our compliance requirements. It couldn't track the audit trails we needed for regulatory reporting. It couldn't even manage the basic approval chains that kept us from violating client contract terms. I sent it to legal. I copied him. He responded once. "We'll fix it on the fly. Speed over perfection, Gerald. Great slogan for a pizza place. Terrible for a multi-million-dollar service contract with clawback clauses." Then came the email. The one he sent department-wide on a Friday afternoon in early October. Subject line, operational. Efficiency Phase 2. Right there in the 4th paragraph was this gem. Some legacy processes remain in place due to internal resistance from team members set in their ways. We appreciate your patience as we modernize. Set in their ways. He didn't name me, but come on, I was the only ops lead still left from the original contract onboarding. It was a slap across the face delivered with a passive-aggressive post-it note. One of my junior analysts, Kevin, messaged me right after. "Was that about you?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I told him to keep his head down and focus on the work. But privately, I was already reviewing the contract. The client contract. The real one. Because Austin had started making noise about outsourcing the implementation arm of the project. "Move it all offshore," he said in one meeting the following week. "Save 30% and look lean for the investors. We can have a team in the Philippines handling the day-to-day ops within 90 days. Never mind that the client's SLA specifically required a US-based escalation lead. Never mind that I was named as the escalation lead. And never mind that we had a clause buried on page 47, added back in March 2019 during some regulatory chaos that tied the contract's continuation to named personnel presence. Named personnel presence. Me. Let me take you back to March 2019 for a minute. The manufacturing sector was dealing with new safety regulations, and everyone was scrambling to stay compliant. Our biggest client, Weber Industrial, was threatening to pull out of every contract they had unless their vendors locked down dedicated escalation leads. No more rotating support teams, no more ticket systems. They wanted a human being they could call at 3 a.m. when their production line went down, and they wanted that person to have the authority to actually fix things. I remember sitting in a conference room with Heinrich Weber, their head of risk management. He was a guy who'd been in manufacturing for 30 years, had survived 3 economic downturns, and didn't suffer fools or buffer lag. His exact words, "We need continuity. Gerald, not just in title, in person. You keep this thing alive. If you leave, we leave." At the time, I was too buried in deadlines to realize how rare that sentence was. But Heinrich insisted on it. He'd worked with too many vendors who promised dedicated support and then shuffled people around like deck chairs. He wanted accountability. He wanted my name on paper. I looped in our legal counsel, Patricia Kellerman. We drafted the clause. Standard at first, dedicated escalation resource, subject to mutual agreement, blah, blah, blah. Then Heinrich sent back his red line. He added 3 words that would change everything, specifically Gerald Whitfield. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this? Tying it to a person, not a position?" I didn't blink. Their organization buys stability. I'm stability. So we did it. Section 6.4b, continuity of named personnel. It wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't HR fluff. The clause gave the client the unilateral right to terminate the contract penalty-free if I resigned. Not fired, resigned. They wanted skin in the game from both sides. I hadn't thought about that clause in years. It was one of 1,000 safeguards we'd layered into the contract when everything was uncertain. Austin? He'd never read the original version. He'd seen the sanitized summaries, the executive briefings, the ones that made it all sound so plug and play. When I brought up the named personnel requirement casually in a leadership sync in late October, Austin waved it off. "We'll get the client to amend that. It's outdated language." I asked if legal had reviewed his new plan. He smiled that MBA smile and said, "Legal works for us. They'll sign off on whatever keeps the business moving." I could have laughed, but I didn't. I just bookmarked the clause again and sent a quiet note to Patricia with the subject line. Reminder, Section 6.4b, named personnel and continuity terms. No commentary, just the clause and a timestamp. After that, things moved faster. By November, I was removed from weekly calls with the client. Austin sent a customer success manager in my place, a well-meaning deer-in-headlights type named Jessica who thought SLA meant service-level agility. The client noticed. Of course they did. "Where's Gerald?" they asked on more than one call. "Oh, he's working on internal optimization," the team replied, reading from Austin's talking points. I was sitting 3 floors above them, watching, listening, waiting. The pressure started to build, not in outbursts, but in the way every hallway conversation ended when I walked past, in the polite silences, in the sudden non-invites to meetings I'd led for years. I was being erased, one calendar update at a time. But you don't erase someone like me that easily. You don't spend 15 years building a system with your fingerprints on every function just to get ghosted by a nepotism hire with an MBA and a hard-on for Trello. So I stayed quiet. Let them build their sandcastle. Let them move the pieces around. Let them forget the foundation had my name on it in ink. It was the quarterly all-hands meeting in early December. Video call, suits, fake smiles, you know the kind. The family photo of corporate dysfunction where everyone pretends Austin isn't just the founder's favor dressed in human form. I was slotted third on the agenda, right after the new marketing lead announced we had a TikTok now, and some VP talked about our digital transformation journey. My update was routine: client health, delivery metrics, escalation rates. The same block of data I'd delivered every quarter like clockwork for the past 15 years. Except this time, I wasn't just reporting numbers. I was marking territory, showing that the contract wasn't just on track. It was thriving under the system I'd built. My metrics were solid. Client satisfaction was up 12% from last quarter. We'd resolved 98.7% of escalations within SLA timeframes. The Weber Industrial account was generating $14 million annually with margins that made the board smile. I had maybe 6 sentences in when it happened. Austin leaned forward in his little square on the screen, smiling like he was about to propose on reality TV. "Actually, Gerald," he said, cutting me off mid-slide, "this will be the last time you'll be presenting on this account. We're transitioning your project to our new offshore optimization team effective next cycle." Then, just like that, he clicked the mute button. Muted me in front of the founder, the board, the investors, the entire company. I couldn't unmute myself. He'd disabled my presenter rights. Just a frozen image of me holding a pointer, mouth slightly open mid-statistic. Every fiber of corporate training screamed at me to stay composed, to take it professionally, to handle this through proper channels later. Behind my eyes, fire. You want to talk humiliation? Try having your legacy wiped like a dry erase board in front of 137 colleagues and 3 shareholders while your replacement plan is announced like a product launch. You want to talk fury? Try being silenced in real time about a project your fingerprints are embedded into while a man who still forwards emails to himself for backup calls it his efficiency win. Here's the thing Austin didn't know. You mute my mic, I sharpen my aim. I didn't say a word. I didn't flinch. I stared into that camera like it owed me money. Then I closed the laptop. Mid-zoom, mid-smirk. Gone. Let him sit in that silence. Let him fumble through the rest of my report like a drunk reading a treasure map. What most people didn't notice, what Austin didn't see, was Patricia Kellerman, our legal counsel, 2 squares over in the gallery view. She leaned forward right after it happened, took out a pen, started writing something down. I caught it before I exited the meeting. Her expression wasn't confusion, it was calculation. Because you don't mute a named individual without consequences, especially not when his name is on the clause that protects the company's biggest revenue stream. I didn't go home that night. I went to my office and opened my old folder labeled Continuity. I pulled up the contract. The real one. The one I helped draft during the chaos of March 2019. The one that said in very plain legal language that if I resigned voluntarily, the client could walk. No fees, no arbitration, no Clause 22 delays. I was the linchpin. And now the whole company had watched Austin announce my irrelevance on the record, with witnesses, under a Zoom license that logs everything. So I started planning, not for revenge, for release. After the Zoom mute heard around the world, I pulled up section 6.4b one more time. My version. Not the one in the shared drive that had been cleaned up by Austin's admin assistant. The original contract with all its protective language intact. There it was. Page 47, paragraph 2. If Gerald Whitfield, the named escalation, officer voluntarily resigns his employment, client reserves the right to terminate this agreement immediately without further obligation, notice, or financial penalty to client. You ever read a sentence that makes your blood go cold and then warm again? I stared at those words for a long time. Then I took a screenshot, saved a PDF copy, emailed both to myself. Subject line 6.4b Insurance. Then, without a word, I opened the secure legal repository we all had access to. Our CYA folder, we jokingly called it. I uploaded the full, unedited contract with a simple note in the metadata. Original version. Executed March 15th, 2019. I didn't send an alert. I didn't forward it with passive-aggressive commentary. I just made sure it was there, time-stamped, quietly breathing in the corner of the corporate server, waiting for someone to notice. The next morning, December 8th, I walked into the office with 2 coffees. One for me, one for no one in particular. I smiled at the receptionist, chatted with the facilities guy about the broken elevator, played the part. But something had fundamentally shifted. Because knowledge is one thing, leverage is another. And I now had both, wrapped in legal language that Austin had never bothered to read. My team was nervous. Kevin approached me near the coffee machine, voice low. Gerald, people are freaking out. They heard about yesterday's call. Is it true Austin's moving everything offshore? I sipped my coffee. Austin makes a lot of announcements. But the client contract, he pressed. I heard there's some clause about you specifically. I didn't confirm or deny. I just told him to keep his head down and not forward anything to his personal email. Let's not give them an excuse to pull security audits, I said. By lunch, the rumor mill was spinning. Junior associates in legal were quietly pulling up contract files. People were whispering in corners. Someone had noticed my upload to the legal repository, and word was spreading like wildfire through the organization. Patricia Kellerman sent me a calendar invite for 2 p.m. Subject line, quick sync on operational continuity. No agenda, no details. Just 2 people who understood exactly what was at stake. The next all-hands meeting was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp the following Tuesday, December 12th. I could feel the digital tension humming through the meeting link before anyone even spoke. Cameras flickered on like stage lights. Board members, department heads, a few brave souls from client success, pretending they hadn't heard the rumors swirling all week. I logged in at 8:59 and waited. Camera off, microphone muted, and my resignation letter folded neatly beside me. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, Austin opened the show. Morning team, he chirped, eyes too bright, suit too crisp, excited to share some progress on our lean operations initiative. We're already seeing results from the new offshore strategy, lower overhead, tighter deliverables, and way more scalability for our clients. I watched his reflection in his own monitor, the way his eyes darted as he read from a script disguised as spontaneity. He was about to launch into a slide deck full of bullet points about synergy and velocity when I made my move. That's when I turned my camera on. No greeting, no wave, no words. Just me staring straight into the lens like I was making eye contact with every person on that call, because I was. In my right hand, my employee badge, the same one I'd swiped every day for 15 years, now dangling like a severed lifeline. In my left, a signed resignation letter held at shoulder height, signature visible, timestamp clear, and behind me, black Zoom background with stark white letters, all caps, effective 9:01 a.m. I didn't blink, I didn't smirk, I didn't gloat. I just let the silence stretch like a taut wire about to snap. You could feel it hit the room like a low-pressure system rolling in. Someone coughed. Someone else dropped their mug. Austin faltered mid-sentence, eyes darting to the screen where I now occupied center stage. Gerald, he said, his voice pinching upward like a balloon losing air. We can discuss this offline. I clicked mute. Not to stop him. To stop me. I wasn't giving him the satisfaction of turning this into a back and forth. He didn't deserve my words. Patricia was 2 squares over in the gallery view. Always stoic, always detached, until now. Her body shifted, leaned forward, squinted at the letter in my hand, then looked toward the founder's square, which notably had no camera on, just the initials CH. I saw it all happen in less than 5 seconds. Austin kept talking, something about making space for new leadership structures, like I hadn't just detonated the room. But no one was listening. The chat was already exploding. Private DMs were flying. The word clause appeared in multiple conversations. I held the frame for exactly 30 more seconds. Let it burn in. Let them feel it. Then, with perfect timing, I clicked leave meeting. I left them floating in the awkward silence of their own arrogance, in a Zoom call where the most important voice had just signed off forever. 9:01 on the dot. The exact moment Section 6.4b activated. The moment I logged off, the company chat ignited like someone had tossed a match into gasoline. Threads exploded with a velocity I'd never seen. Did he really quit? Was that his actual badge? Is the clause real? Holy shit, we're screwed. Panic wrapped in professionalism. Emojis desperately trying to soften the free fall. Patricia didn't wait for permission. She left the meeting mid-sentence, phone already dialing. By the time she reached Heinrich Weber, our client's head of risk management, the news had already traveled through some invisible corporate grapevine. "Patricia, I'm calling to clarify Gerald Whitfield's employment status," she said, voice clipped and professional. Heinrich didn't bother with pleasantries. "So he's really gone?" Patricia hesitated, probably hoping for some wiggle room. "We're still assessing the situation and exploring our options." "We're not," Heinrich said flatly. "We're reviewing our contract terms. And without Gerald, we have no interest in continuing this relationship." That was it. No negotiation, no begging for reconsideration, just German efficiency cutting through corporate BS like a hot knife. 21 hours and 13 minutes after I held up my resignation letter on Zoom, Weber Industrial sent a formal termination notice. Subject line, activation of clause 6.4b, immediate contract exit. One clean email, cold and legal, confirming that the biggest account in the company, $14 million annually, was now gone. Investor confidence didn't wobble. It collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. By midday, 2 board members had canceled their upcoming meetings, citing urgent internal matters. One forwarded a message chain to legal demanding to know what genius approved this transition without a succession plan. Austin's name was mentioned 5 times in the first paragraph alone. Austin tried damage control, spinning the loss as a regrettable but ultimately manageable churn event. He even pushed out a company-wide email titled, "Change Brings Opportunity," complete with a quote about chaos and innovation. But legal wasn't playing along. When investors asked directly if the contract was lost because of my resignation, Patricia didn't hedge. "Yes," she said in a conference call I heard about later. Clause 6.4b was triggered. It was valid, binding, and ignored by leadership despite multiple warnings. She didn't mention names, didn't need to. The founder's email leaked 3 days later. Someone in IT had enough and forwarded it to half the company. Subject line, "You muted the named person." No greeting, no corporate speak, just Charles Hartley's fury in pure, unfiltered prose. We entrusted him with continuity, and instead, we got ego. You don't silence the clause holder mid-call and expect no consequences. You muted the named person. You signed our exit slip with a smirk. By the time the company scrambled to contain it, screenshots were already making rounds in group chats across the entire organization. Austin was stripped of project oversight that Friday, quietly suspended pending internal review. Corporate speak for, "We're figuring out how to fire the founder's son without causing a family meltdown." Meanwhile, I was already 6 steps ahead. I'd accepted a consulting offer from Weber Industrial themselves. They wanted continuity. They got it. New office, new contract, same expertise they'd always valued. That Tuesday morning, a bouquet arrived at my apartment. Deep crimson roses, simple and elegant. No card, just a single folded note tucked under the ribbon. "If you ever want to come back, we'll do it your way. CH." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just placed the note in my desk drawer next to a copy of Section 6.4b. Funny thing, I never raised my voice. I just made sure they finally listened.